They say betrayal feels like a knife to the back. For me, it wasn't like that at all. There was no sharp pain, no blood, no scream, just silence. A silence so loud it swallowed everything. My thoughts, my breath, my identity. I used to believe that the worst kind of betrayal was a man cheating on his wife, a husband lying beside another woman, whispering promises once meant only for you. But I was wrong. There's something worse, much worse. It's when that other woman shares your blood. When she calls you sister. I'm not telling this story for pity. I'm telling it because I need to breathe again. Because for the past 2 years, every inhale has felt like breathing underwater. You think you'll drown, but somehow your lungs keep forcing you to survive. My name is Emily. I'm 34 years old. I used to think I had a good life, a quiet life. I lived in the suburbs of California, in a cozy 2-story house with white shutters and a garden that smelled like lavender in the spring. I taught yoga, not because I had to, but because I loved helping people find peace in the chaos. I thought I'd found mine. I married Jack when I was 26. He was stable, calm, grounded. Everything I wasn't at the time. He had this quiet strength to him. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words landed like anchors. We were never that wild, passionate kind of couple you see in movies, but we were solid. I thought that mattered more. I thought it would be enough. And then there was Lisa, my baby sister, 8 years younger. Stunning in that effortless way some women are just born with. Long chestnut hair, wide hazel eyes, a laugh that made people stop mid-sentence. But she was also lost, always drifting from job to job, man to man, chasing some version of herself she couldn't quite catch. So I let her move in with us for a little while, just until she figured things out. I didn't hesitate, because that's what family does. That's what I do. I raised Lisa in many ways. After our parents split, it was me who packed her lunch for school, braided her hair before picture day, stayed up late quizzing her for exams. When she cried, I held her. When she fell, I picked her up. I was her sister, her second mother, her safe place. Never did I imagine she would become the storm that ripped my life apart. I still remember the last morning before everything changed. It was one of those mornings where nothing feels out of place. The sun was coming in through the bedroom blinds in soft golden strips. Jack was making coffee in the kitchen, the smell drifting through the hallway. Lisa was sitting cross-legged on the couch, scrolling through her phone, hair still messy from sleep. She looked up, smiled at me, and said, "Morning, Em." I smiled back. I swear to God I smiled back. Because that's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't wear a warning sign. It doesn't creep in like a monster under your bed. It sits at your table. It sleeps under your roof. It smiles at you with your sister's face. After everything happened, people asked me how I didn't see it, how I could have missed the signs. But love blinds you. Especially when it's love you've carried for so long it feels like part of your DNA. I didn't see anything because I didn't want to see. And maybe, somewhere deep down, I couldn't imagine that the 2 people I trusted most could be capable of something so intimate, so vicious. It wasn't just the act that broke me, it was where it happened. Our bedroom, our bed. The place I had made love to my husband 1,000 times. The place where we whispered about the baby names we'd never use. The place I cried into his chest when I miscarried and he promised we'd be okay. That bed still sits in that room, even now. I left the house, but the bed stayed. I wonder if it remembers. I wonder if it can feel the weight of what it witnessed. Some nights when I can't sleep, I imagine going back there, standing in the doorway, looking at the exact spot where everything ended. I don't know why. Maybe I'm hoping to feel something other than what I always feel. Hollow, tired, cold. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This isn't a story about revenge. I didn't burn the house down. I didn't slash tires or throw punches. No, this is a story about heartbreak, about how trust is a fragile thing, and once broken, it slices in places you never even knew could bleed. It's about how silence can be the loudest scream, and how even after everything, You still remember how they used to make you laugh. This is my story. Raw, imperfect, and unfiltered. I don't need you to like me. I don't even need you to understand. I just need you to listen. Because this happened, and I survived it. But God, I'll never be the same. Before I became the woman who was betrayed, I was simply a woman in love, with her life, with her home, and with the people she called family. I met Jack at a friend's birthday dinner in downtown San Diego. He wasn't the kind of man who commanded attention. He didn't talk loudly or make bold moves, but when he spoke, I listened. There was something steady in him, like a quiet harbor in the middle of a storm. I was 26, recovering from a string of heartbreaks and hungry for something real. Jack was exactly that. Real, solid, dependable. He didn't try to impress me with extravagant gestures. He remembered how I liked my coffee, black, 2 sugars, and how I always turned the pillow over to the cold side before falling asleep. He called when he said he would. He stayed when things got hard. That was all it took. 2 years later, we got married in a vineyard just outside Napa. The sky was overcast that day, but Jack held my hand so tightly I didn't notice the gray. We said our vows under a canopy of string lights, surrounded by friends and family. Lisa stood beside me in a dusty rose bridesmaid dress, tears in her eyes. I remember how tightly she hugged me afterward, how she whispered, "I'm so happy for you, Em. You deserve this." And I believed her. Back then, Lisa was still finding her way. She'd dropped out of college twice, dated men who drained her spirit, and moved across the country more times than I could count. She was beautiful, yes, but fragile, like a porcelain vase with a tiny crack down the side. One small tap, and she'd shatter. So I stepped in, like I always had. I helped her with rent when she couldn't make it, took her to therapy when she spiraled, answered phone calls at 3 a.m. when her world felt too heavy. When she said she needed to get away from the city, I told her, "Come stay with us, just until you get back on your feet." I didn't ask Jack first. I knew he'd say yes, because Jack was kind. He was patient. He was the kind of man who didn't raise his voice or break things when he was angry. He simply paused, breathed, waited for the storm to pass. I didn't know there was one building inside him. At first, it felt easy. Lisa moved into the guest room. She offered to help around the house, cooked once in a while, watered the garden, folded laundry even when I told her not to. She made Jack laugh, which I appreciated. God knows marriage gets quiet after a while. We fall into patterns. We forget to laugh. But soon, there were moments, tiny, almost imperceptible things, that didn't sit right. I'd walk into the kitchen and find them mid-conversation, only for the room to fall silent the second I stepped in. Or I'd come home from teaching a late class and see them on the couch, heads bent over a movie they both seemed a little too absorbed in. I'd ask what they were watching, and Lisa would shrug. "Just something dumb. You wouldn't like it." She was probably right. But that wasn't the point. It wasn't jealousy, not at first. It was more like confusion, like walking into a room where someone's moved the furniture just slightly. You can't quite name what's changed, but your body senses it. The air feels different, thicker. One night, I saw Jack smiling down at his phone in that way a man does when he's reading something intimate. His thumb lingered over the screen too long. When he looked up and saw me watching, he locked the phone immediately. I didn't say anything. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But the words got caught somewhere between my suspicion and my shame. Instead, I kissed him on the cheek and went to bed. He followed me 10 minutes later, pulled me close, and whispered, "You okay?" I nodded. Lied. Of course. But I wasn't. And deep down, I think he knew. Lisa started dressing differently around the house. Shorter shorts, no bra under her oversized shirts. I chalked it up to comfort. It was summer after all. Who was I to police what my sister wore in her own home? Still, it bothered me. Not because I thought Jack would look, but because he didn't not look. And once you notice a man noticing, it's hard to unsee it. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the problem wasn't them, It was me. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I wasn't being affectionate enough. Maybe I was reading too much into nothing. But even nothing has a shape. Even silence has weight. I stopped inviting Lisa to girls' nights with my friends. I started watching Jack's phone habits like a detective. I'd glance at the guest room door before bed, listening for sounds that didn't belong. I told myself I was crazy, even as the crazy started to feel more like clarity. The worst part was the guilt. Because I loved them both. Because I trusted them. Because they were the two people I would have walked through fire for. And now, I couldn't look at either of them without wondering what I wasn't seeing. Still, I kept the peace. I smiled at dinner. I asked how their days were. I even laughed at their inside jokes, those little quips that didn't include me anymore. Because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You give them the benefit of the doubt. You ignore the voice in your head screaming at you to run. You pretend, until pretending becomes unbearable. Until the truth finally walks in on its own. And when it didn't knock. It didn't ask for permission. It just opened the door and shattered everything I thought I knew. I wanted so desperately to be wrong. That's what I kept telling myself every time my gut twisted for no visible reason. Every time I watched Jack pour Lisa a glass of wine and brush his fingers just a little too close to hers. Every time I caught the flicker of something, intimate, secretive, passing between them when they thought I wasn't looking. But I kept quiet. Because to speak the fear out loud would make it real, and I wasn't ready for real. Not then. I told myself to grow up, to stop being so sensitive, that not every touch meant something, that family could be close without it being wrong, that maybe I was the one who was changing, withdrawing, imagining shadows in the light. And yet the air in our home began to shift. It was subtle at first, just a strange undercurrent, a tension I couldn't name. Lisa stopped locking the door to the bathroom when Jack was home. Jack started calling her Liz in this new, softened voice, as if he were letting her in on a private joke. I tried to brush it off, but paranoia doesn't sleep. It creeps in during the quietest moments, when you're folding laundry and find her camisole in his drawer, when you hear laughter behind a closed door and realize it's been going on just a little too long. Still, nothing was conclusive. Nothing I could grab hold of and say, look, here it is, the truth. So I buried the questions, swallowed the unease, told myself to wait it out. Then came that weekend. I was supposed to go on a yoga retreat, 3 days upstate, no phone, no internet, just silence and breathwork and a dozen women trying to heal from things they couldn't name. Jack encouraged me to go. You need this, he said. You've been so tense lately. I'll hold down the fort. Lisa chimed in, bright-eyed and eager. I'll stay and keep him company. Don't worry, Em. I'll make sure he doesn't burn the house down. I smiled, laughed even. God, how easily I laughed. I left on a Friday morning, kissed them both goodbye at the door. Jack squeezed my hand. Lisa winked. I remember thinking, they look so comfortable together. Too comfortable. I tried to shake it off. Drove north with a trunk full of yoga mats and herbal teas, telling myself this would be good for me, that I needed space to clear my head, to come back feeling more centered, less suspicious. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. On Saturday afternoon, a landslide closed the highway to the retreat. Emergency alerts buzzed everyone's phones. The event was canceled. Some of the women decided to wait it out in nearby towns. I chose to drive back. I didn't text Jack. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to surprise him. Maybe I wanted to catch him missing me. Maybe I needed the comfort of walking into my home and seeing everything exactly as I left it. Instead, I came home to a silence that didn't feel empty. It felt occupied. The front door was locked from the inside. I used my spare key. The house was quiet, but not still. There was music playing, low, rhythmic, something sultry, the kind of music you don't put on for yourself. I remember the exact feeling in my chest as I climbed the stairs. Not anger, not fear. It was detachment, like watching someone else's life unfold in slow motion. My hand trembled on the doorknob, but I turned it anyway. And there they were. Jack. Lisa. My husband. My sister. On our bed. My bed. It took me a moment to understand what I was seeing. Their bodies tangled in a way I can't unsee. Sheets pushed down, skin against skin. Lisa's eyes wide when she saw me. Jack's mouth half open, frozen in a gasp. A single second stretched into eternity, and still, no one moved. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't even blink. I just stood there as everything inside me collapsed. Not all at once, but piece by piece, like watching a building fall in on itself, slowly, with dust clouding every breath. Jack stumbled for words. Lisa grabbed a sheet to cover herself, her face pale and wild. She said my name like it meant something. Emily. Wait, I didn't mean. But she did. They both did. Because betrayal isn't an accident. It's a choice, one they made together, over and over again. I turned around and walked out. My legs carried me even though I couldn't feel them. I got in my car and drove until the sun went down. I pulled over at some roadside motel, hands still shaking, the image of them burned into the backs of my eyelids. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I just sat on the edge of a stiff bed, staring at a beige wall, trying to figure out when my life stopped being mine. And the worst part? It wasn't just that Jack had cheated, or that Lisa had betrayed me. It was that they had done it there, in that room, in that bed, the one Jack and I picked out together, the one where I once held his face in my hands and told him I couldn't imagine growing old without him. They desecrated that space. They made a shrine of something I thought was sacred. That was the night my world ended. But it was only the beginning of the story. The hours after I left the house are a blur of motion without meaning. I remember the steering wheel beneath my fingers, the ache settling into my shoulders, the sound of my breath ricocheting off the car windows like a storm I couldn't contain. The silence in the car felt louder than any scream I could have let out. I didn't even know where I was going. I just drove, past familiar intersections, past the grocery store where Jack once kissed my forehead in the rain, past the cafe where Lisa told me she wanted to be more like me. Eventually, I pulled into a 24-hour gas station and parked in the farthest corner. I sat there for hours with the engine off, keys clenched in my fist, cold creeping up my legs. I stared straight ahead, not thinking, not crying, just existing. Something inside me had cracked open. Not a clean break, more like a slow rupture, the kind that leaks something poisonous into your bloodstream long after the initial wound. I didn't go home that night. I checked into a cheap roadside motel, one of those places with peeling wallpaper and buzzing lights. The receptionist didn't ask questions, just slid a room key across the counter with eyes that had seen too much. I think she knew. There's a look women like us carry, like we've just walked out of a fire and left parts of ourselves in the flames. The room was small and smelled of stale air and cleaning chemicals, but it was mine. I sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like hours, fully dressed, shoes still on, staring at my reflection in the dark screen of the TV. Who was I now? Everything I had believed about my life had come undone in the span of a few seconds. My husband, my sister, my bed, my body, my history. It felt like I was floating outside of myself, watching a stranger hold their own hands to stop them from trembling. I didn't call anyone. Not friends, not family. I didn't even cry. Not that night. When morning came, it didn't feel like morning. It just felt like more darkness pretending to be light. I showered without really noticing the water. I got dressed without knowing where I was going next. And then my phone rang. Jack. Of course it was Jack. I let it ring, and ring, and ring again. I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't want to hear his voice, but because I didn't trust what I might say if I did. He left a voicemail. His voice cracked halfway through, like a boy caught in a lie. Emily, I'm so sorry. Please just talk to me. It's not what you think. But it was. Lisa didn't call. She didn't text. She didn't even try. That silence hurt more than anything Jack could have said. Her silence was confirmation. Her silence was shame. I didn't go home for 2 more days. When I finally did, the house looked the same. The garden was watered. The mail had been collected. Lisa was gone. No note, no apology, no explanation. Just gone. Jack was waiting in the kitchen like a ghost of himself. He didn't touch me. He didn't come close. He just stood there, looking as though the gravity of what he'd done was finally catching up to him. I asked one question. How long? He hesitated. That was all I needed to see. The moment he hesitated, I knew it wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't a drunken mistake or a lapse in judgment. It was a choice. Repeated, deliberate, calculated. I remember thinking, he didn't just betray me, he chose to. Again and again in the moments I trusted him most. Emily, he said softly, I didn't mean for it to happen. I laughed. It came out bitter and strange, like something unfamiliar escaping my throat. You didn't mean to have sex with my sister in our bed? I asked. You didn't mean to lie to me for God knows how long? You didn't mean to look me in the eyes every day while building a second life behind mine? He lowered his head. That night, I slept in the guest room, the one Lisa had stayed in. I curled up under the unfamiliar blanket and tried not to think about what the mattress might remember. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to know how many times, or when it started, or what she wore the first time he touched her. My imagination was cruel enough without facts to sharpen it. What haunted me most was the intimacy of it. Not just the physical act, but the emotional betrayal, the shared smiles, the inside jokes, the way they'd started excluding me from the orbit of my own home. I kept replaying every small moment that had once seemed benign. A glance, a laugh, a door left slightly ajar. I couldn't stop rewinding the tape in my mind, trying to catch the exact second when everything began to unravel. I stayed in that house for another week. Every night I moved between the guest room and the couch, unable to bear the thought of our bedroom. That room had once been a sanctuary. Now it felt like a crime scene. Jack tried. I'll give him that. He cooked dinner, folded the laundry, left notes by the coffee pot. I love you. Please talk to me. Don't give up on us. But it was already over. He just didn't know it yet. I didn't scream. I didn't break things. I didn't fall apart the way people expect, because betrayal doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it's quiet, slow, like watching yourself die in real time, one cell at a time. I filed for separation the following Monday. When I handed him the papers, he looked at me like a man watching the earth split beneath his feet. I thought we could fix this, he whispered. We can't fix what you set on fire, I said, and then I walked away. I thought walking away would be the hardest part. It wasn't. The hardest part came after. The silence, the echo of everything unsaid, the unbearable weight of what remained when love was gone, but the memories stayed. The morning after I handed Jack the separation papers, I packed a small suitcase and left the house. I didn't take much. A few clothes, my journals, my grandmother's necklace, and the book I'd been halfway through for months but couldn't bring myself to finish. I didn't want to take anything that reminded me of us, of them. I moved into a small furnished apartment not far from my old neighborhood. It was temporary, sterile, a liminal space between the life I had and the life I didn't yet know how to begin. The walls were bare, the mattress too soft, the kitchen smelled like someone else's garlic, but for the first time in weeks, I could breathe without feeling like the walls were listening. The first night alone, I sat on the floor with a cup of tea and cried. Not the loud, cinematic kind of crying you see in movies. No heaving sobs, no screams into pillows. Just quiet tears, slipping down my face without permission, like my body had finally remembered it was allowed to grieve. It was grief. That's what betrayal really is. People talk about anger, about vengeance, about the thrill of getting even, but no one tells you how much it hurts, how it physically hurts, how your chest aches in places you didn't know had nerve endings, how food tastes like cardboard, how your favorite songs become unbearable, how sleep becomes a battleground between what you remember and what you wish you could forget. Some days I couldn't get out of bed. I'd stare at the ceiling for hours, replaying everything over and over in my head. Lisa's face when I opened the door, Jack's voice in the kitchen. The way their betrayal didn't explode, it unfolded, slow and deliberate, like they'd been building a world without me and finally decided to stop hiding it. Other days, I got up, made coffee, and went for long walks with no destination. I just needed to move, to prove to myself that I was still capable of putting one foot in front of the other. But even then, the war never stopped. It lived inside me, this gnawing thing made of questions, blame, shame. What did I do wrong? Was I not enough? Did I miss something? Did I let this happen? The hardest thing to accept wasn't just that I'd been betrayed, it was that I didn't see it coming. Or worse, that maybe I did, and I chose to look away. That somewhere deep down I had known, and I let love make a fool of me. I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Alston, mid-50s, calm eyes, a voice like still water. The first time I sat on her couch, I couldn't even say the words. My husband slept with my sister. Just saying it out loud felt like vomiting glass. It sounded too cruel to be real, too surreal to belong to my life. Dr. Alston didn't push. She just nodded, waited. She asked me how long I'd been holding that inside. I told her, I don't even know when I started holding it. I just know I haven't let go of anything since. Week by week, we unraveled the knots. We talked about my childhood, about how I'd always been the fixer, the responsible one, the caretaker, how I had taken care of Lisa since I was 12, how I had built my marriage like a fortress and convinced myself that loyalty was enough to keep love alive. She helped me see that betrayal doesn't always mean I was broken, that sometimes people betray not because you failed them, but because they failed themselves. Still, it didn't stop the pain. Healing isn't linear. It comes in waves. Some days I was fine, laughing at a podcast, making plans with friends. Other days I found myself curled up on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m., suffocating under memories I didn't invite. I deleted Jack's number, blocked Lisa on everything. But ghosts don't need contact information to haunt you. They live in the mundane, the way someone says your name a certain way in a grocery store, the smell of his cologne on a stranger's coat, the way your reflection looks unfamiliar in a dress he once said made you beautiful. There was a moment, about 6 months after everything, when I thought about calling Lisa. Not to forgive her, not to scream, just to ask, why? Why him? Why me? Why that way? But I didn't, because deep down, I knew the answer wouldn't change anything. And maybe I didn't want to hear her voice. Maybe I didn't want to discover that she wasn't even sorry. Instead, I wrote letters I never sent, to Jack, to Lisa, to myself. In one of them, I wrote, I miss the version of you I believed in, and I miss the version of me that believed. Another time, I wrote, I wish you'd broken my bones instead. At least bones know how to heal. But not all of me was broken. There were small victories, tiny flickers of light. I started teaching yoga again, not full classes, just private sessions, gentle stretches with women going through their own quiet wars. One woman was divorcing after 20 years. Another had just lost her daughter. We didn't talk much. We didn't have to. Our grief knew each other in silence. One night after class, a student said, You have the kind of calm people don't learn from books. I smiled, not because I believed her, but because I wanted to. Slowly, I started reclaiming space. I bought a new bed, firm, clean, mine. I painted the walls of my apartment warm, earthy colors. I started cooking again, not for anyone else, just for me. Dishes Jack never liked. Spices Lisa found too much. I took long, aimless drives with no one in the passenger seat, singing off-key to songs I'd once turned off because they reminded me of us. And somewhere along the way, I realized something. I wasn't just healing from them. I was healing from the version of me that tolerated less than I deserved, the version of me that thought loyalty required silence, the version of me that would rather bleed quietly than make someone else uncomfortable. Grief had gutted me. But in its hollow space, something began to grow. Not forgiveness, not yet, but clarity. And with clarity came a kind of peace, not the kind that forgets, but the kind that survives. There is a particular kind of quiet that comes after the worst has already happened. It's not peace, it's not relief. It's more like standing in the ruins of a house that once sheltered your life and realizing the storm is gone, but so is everything else. And so you begin the slow, painful work of picking up the pieces, not to rebuild what was, but to understand what remains. For me, that work started on a random Tuesday. Nothing special about the day, no anniversary, no trigger, just sunlight filtering through the blinds, the smell of coffee I'd made only for myself, and a sudden, simple realization. I was still here. I hadn't died. Not from the betrayal, not from the silence, not from the loss. I was still breathing, still waking up, still tying my shoes and brushing my hair and remembering to feed the plants. Grief hadn't killed me. It had somehow made me more alive. That didn't mean I was okay. Healing isn't a straight line. It loops, stutters, folds in on itself. But little by little, I stopped living in the past tense. I stopped replaying the moment I opened the bedroom door. I stopped checking their social media pages, stopped drafting letters I'd never send. I began practicing something else instead. Presence. It wasn't easy. My body had become a battlefield of memories. Every room held a ghost. Every street corner whispered a name. But I started carving out moments, small, sacred ones, where I could just be with myself. Sometimes it was as simple as lighting a candle and sitting in silence. Sometimes it was harder. Like going back to that yoga studio, the one I had avoided for months because Jack had helped me paint the walls, and Lisa had once taken my beginner class just to support me. But I went. I stepped inside, barefoot on cold hardwood, and I let my grief move through my body instead of burying it. I cried in downward dog. I shook in warrior pose. I let my breath catch in my throat and didn't apologize when it did. And the more I showed up, the more I began to feel like I was re-entering my own skin. Not the woman I was before, it was too late for that, but someone else entirely, someone quieter, stronger, wiser, not immune to pain, but no longer ruled by it. It wasn't all graceful. There were nights when loneliness clung to me like a second skin. I'd lie awake wondering if Jack was still with her, if he ever thought of me. I'd imagine Lisa's face. Not the one that looked ashamed in the moment I caught them, but the one I knew from childhood. The girl with tangled hair and scraped knees who used to sleep beside me after thunderstorms. I missed her. Not the version who betrayed me, the version who used to be mine, but I knew I could never have her back, not the way I needed to. One morning, I opened my email and found a message from her. The subject line was just my name. It was short, apologetic in a way, but not entirely remorseful. "I'm sorry for hurting you," she wrote, "but I didn't plan it. I didn't expect to fall in love with him. I know you hate me. I just wanted you to know I never wanted to destroy you." I stared at that last sentence for a long time. She never wanted to destroy me, but she did. And in that moment, I realized something else. Her guilt didn't change my pain. Her reasons didn't undo what she had done. Her version of the story didn't have the power to rewrite mine. So I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I was finally learning that closure isn't something other people give you. It's something you create when you stop waiting for the apology to feel big enough. In therapy, I started speaking more about my own choices, not theirs. I talked about the way I used to lose myself in caregiving, the way I equated love with sacrifice, the way I measured my worth by how much I could endure without complaint. I began to understand the patterns, how I'd made myself so indispensable to others that I forgot how to be essential to myself. Dr. Alston said something once that stayed with me. There's a difference between being needed and being loved, and you've spent your whole life confusing the two. That was the day I cried in front of her, really cried. Not because I was heartbroken, but because I felt seen, for the first time maybe in years. From then on, my healing stopped being about Jack or Lisa. It stopped being about revenge or justice. It became something else entirely. A return. A return to myself. I started doing things I used to love. I went back to baking, even though the smell of vanilla used to remind me of nights we all laughed together in the kitchen. I started journaling again, not just about the pain, but about who I was becoming. I took solo walks by the ocean, let the waves remind me that everything breaks and rebuilds in cycles. One day, I looked in the mirror and didn't see a woman who had been betrayed. I saw a woman who had survived. Not perfectly, not effortlessly, but truthfully. And that was enough. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to be anyone's sister, anyone's wife, anyone's source of stability or strength. I was my own. There was no dramatic turning point, no grand epiphany, just a series of quiet, defiant choices to stay with myself, even when it hurt. To be kind to the girl who had trusted too much. To honor the woman who was learning to trust again, this time, not in others, but in her own reflection. They broke something in me, but they didn't take everything, and what I rebuilt from the ruins, it belonged to me, only me. 2 years have passed. Sometimes I still catch myself flinching when I hear a voice that sounds like his in a grocery store. Or when I see a woman with Lisa's posture laughing too freely in a cafe. Grief has a way of aging inside you. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't even soften. It just changes its name. I live in Oregon now. A quiet town near the coast where no one knows what happened. No one knows my history, or the weight of my last name, or the sound of my voice when I used to call for someone who wouldn't come. Here, I am just a woman who walks her dog at 7 a.m. So who buys too many candles, who keeps an old journal by her bed but doesn't write in it every night anymore. I found a house with wide windows and wood floors that creak when I pace. I painted the walls soft sage, planted rosemary along the fence line. My bedroom faces east. I let the light wake me. I replaced the bed. I remember standing in the furniture store, my hands grazing the fabric of a headboard and thinking, this one will not remember. This one will be mine. There is no more our, just my space, my quiet, my breath. I started a small yoga studio here, nothing big, just a few mats, a kettle for tea, a bell I ring at the end of each class. Women come with stories folded behind their ribs. You can feel it in the way they move. Careful, hesitant, heavy. We don't always talk. Sometimes we just breathe together. Sometimes that's all you need to remember you still can. One evening, a woman stayed after class and asked, "Have you always been this calm?" I laughed before I could stop myself. It wasn't a bitter laugh, just honest. "No," I said. "I earned it." Because I did. Every second of silence, every inch of softness. I earned through nights that hollowed me out, and mornings I thought I'd never get through. I earned it by learning to live with a version of myself I once tried to abandon. I earned it by not turning into them. By not letting betrayal become the most interesting thing about me. Some people still ask if I ever forgave them. It's always the same question, wrapped in different language. Forgiveness. It's funny, people treat it like a switch, like something you give or withhold, like a gesture, a decision. But for me, it wasn't a moment. It was a slow, aching release. Not for them, but for me. Forgiveness, I've learned, is not always reconciliation. Sometimes it's a quiet resignation to the truth, a surrender to what cannot be changed, a final goodbye to the version of the story where it could have gone differently. I forgave Lisa the day I stopped needing her to explain. I forgave Jack the day I stopped imagining he might come back with the right words. I forgave myself the day I looked in the mirror and no longer saw a fool, but a woman who loved deeply and was hurt deeply and still got up anyway. There is strength in survival. But there is more strength in choosing to live after surviving, in not letting the wound become your entire name. Now, when I lie in bed at night, I think less about what happened and more about what didn't. The things I almost lost but held on to. My voice, my compassion, my ability to love, even when love betrayed me. I don't know where they are now. Sometimes I wonder if they're still together, if they look at each other and feel the weight of what it cost, or if they've buried it like people do when the truth is too ugly to hold in daylight. But mostly, I don't wonder at all, because my life is full, not in the loud, glittering way it once was, but in the quiet, grounded way I never thought I'd find. I have friends who know the version of me that came after, who never met the wife or the sister or the woman who curled up on bathroom tiles at 3 a.m. They only know me now, steadier, softer, unshakable. There are days I still carry the echo of what was lost, but it no longer drowns me. It no longer owns me. I lived through it, and more importantly, I lived past it. The past will always be there, folded into the corners of who I am. But it is not my home anymore. It is not my ending. The truth is, they broke my heart. But they did not break me. And every morning I wake in this quiet house, breathe in the salt air from the open window, and choose myself again. That is the story I live now. That is the story I became.